All right, it's about 1:02, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. I'm Marty Hogan. I'm with the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports, and this is our monthly webinar that we do. We try and bring you guys the best content available. Anybody who's doing anything in the industry worth notifying or worth recognizing, we try and get them on here and have them explain what they're doing. And today we have Chris Willard. He's going to talk about how they engage hunters in Oregon. Chris is the R3 coordinator at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he is going to talk about what they do in Oregon to engage their hunters. Before we get started here, I just want to say if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat box in the bottom right corner. We'll go back after the presentation. The presentation will take about 30 minutes or so. Afterwards, we'll go back and ask all your questions in order. If there are any leftover questions, we'll have Chris post those to the National R3 Plan website. So without further ado, Chris, I will let you take over.
Thanks, Marty. I really appreciate that introduction. I will let everybody know that I have a bit of a summer cold right now, so please bear with me as we move through this. But hopefully I'll be able to keep it together and get through the entire presentation without being too annoying to you. I'll just dive right in. They started with the why, and like all natural resource agencies and organizations that are working on this stuff, we all probably share a mission statement similar to what the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is, which is protecting and enhancing fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. That said, I think that it's really important to recognize how we as individuals contribute to that mission. And we do that specifically, in my mind, by helping people make personal connections to what are really their fish and wildlife resources. And so I challenge us all to think about that when we're considering why we want to take on actions, just to keep that in the back of our minds. We're doing this to promote species and habitats, and at the end of the day, that's what's driving all of us. We've been working here in Oregon on recruitment and retention since about 2008, 2009. This graph here shows the state that we were in 2012, which is a pretty steep decline over the past 20 years. This is nothing new to anybody who's listening today, but this was really the call to action that we need to get super serious about hunter and angler recruitment and retention here in Oregon. At that time, this is what our customer engagement kind of looked like. Most of our efforts that we would classify as recruitment and retention, reactivation type initiatives really revolved around information education division functions, things like youth pheasant hunts, a campaign leading up to hunting season, those types of things. And there was really never any effort given to link those initiatives or programs together to maintain customer engagement over time. So what you had is a model of transactional engagement to where, yeah, you had some big blips in the amount of customers that you're engaging at any given time, but we weren't doing anything to try to keep them engaged. And that's one of the things that we feel led to the declining participation. So in 2012, at this point in time, we had been working with the WAFWA Association Recruitment and Retention Committee. We helped develop that committee. And so we'd been working on some of these things for a couple of years. One of the initial things that came out of that committee was states were beginning to see the need to have somebody as the tip of the sword for recruitment and retention activities. In 2012, my position was reclassified to become that position. And this is one of the things I'm really passionate about in terms of R3 coordinators. I think for us to be successful, we have to have influence throughout a broad cross-section of the agency. And the reason for that is because, as we all know, recruitment, retention, reactivation, R3 is not just an information education function. There are so many other things that have to be working together to be successful. At my agency, I'm fortunate enough to enjoy influence over regulations license structures and pricing, license sales platform and budgets, and we've done a lot of work in those areas over the last few years, and my voice has definitely been heard on that. So I'm thankful to my agency for giving me that level of support. And then I also directly oversee the education programs that really get to the hands-on aspect of recruitment and retention. So I just wanted to make sure I threw that in there. I think it's really important that the folks who agencies put as the tip of the sword for R3 enjoy that wide-ranging influence throughout their agency. Also in 2012, at the end of 2012, one of the first things that I was able to do was get our recruitment, retention, and reactivation action plan adopted formally by the agency. That happened at the end of 2012. Here's a version of our picture of my copy. As you can see, it's pretty well worn. It's nothing fancy. It's an outline. This was 2012, so we were still looking at a way to say recruitment, retention, and reactivation a little easier. Luckily, we landed on R3 because that's a much easier tagline to say. But I guess the point is that recruitment, retention, reactivation action plans don't have to be fancy or have a lot of production value to them. This one's an outline. I've look at it often, and I think that it still stands the test of time and is very complementary to the work that's been done in the National Hunting and Shooting Sports Action Plan. One of the things that our action plan called for was this customer-centered approach, and that's the realization that there's more to R3 than just programs and events and promotional campaigns, that you have partnerships, you have your mobile technology and your social media, licensing, regulations, website. Everything has to be working together and centered on the customer to be successful. In other words, we know that we have to have a cross-functional approach to recruitment and retention if we're going to be successful. The problem with that is that agencies at that time, again, this is probably early 2013, didn't have a good background in a customer-centric approach. So one of the things that I started doing was benchmarking other industries, looking specifically at some of the technology companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Intel, in addition to some of the automobile manufacturers like Toyota, to look at how do they structure their business practices around the customers. And so one of the things I did is develop the hunter and angler customer journey, which there's a lot of information on this on the R3 website. I'll go through some of the strategies that are focused on this later, but I'm not going to go into great detail. But I will say that this is on our wall here at ODFW, and we're constantly looking back to look at which touch points we can provide to our customers that are going to be high value, and that those customers aren't going to get anyplace else, or which and if we're not in a position to create those customer touch points, which partnerships can we develop to begin serving the customers at their place of need. So that's one tool that sets the customer journey, sets our overall strategy. The other thing that's super important that we developed is the R3 opportunity calendars, and we have one for hunting and one for angling. And so Oregon is a state that's blessed with tremendous variety of hunting opportunities, and this is a realization that we're a lean staff, we can't focus on everything, and from a business standpoint, it doesn't really make sense for us to focus on anything. And so what we did is I've identified some priority opportunities, and we created those, we grouped those based on a couple of different criteria. Number one is it relatively easy to get into, and is there a lot of room to get into it? So in other words, if we have some pretty great grouse hunting here in Oregon, but there's not very many people that take advantage of that. So it wouldn't be a good return on our investment to promote that particular opportunity. Likewise, we have antelope hunting here in Oregon, but it's all controlled draw, and 100% of our tags are sold and it actually takes over 10 years to get enough preference points to draw one. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to focus on those types of activities. These are kind of the revenue drivers for our agency, and those specific opportunities that we feel we can push more people into that it can absorb that increase in participation. And so this has been very helpful because it's broken down into the season, so it tells us the time of the year that season is occurring, but also we pay attention to when should we market for those different opportunities. And we really try to base our discussions on the timing of whether it's promotions or outreach events or hands-on clinics around this calendar. So that's an important tool for us. Another tool that we have invested in is a CRM system. And this allows us to mine our licensed sales database and really reach out to our customers based on their specific activity. So again, another tool. And if you see a theme here, at the beginning of this presentation is all about setting an infrastructure for R3 activities. I think the tendency is to jump right into strategy or right into tactics and doing things, but it's critically important that you kind of set the stage before you get to that point so you can have success. Along those same lines, Oregon worked with the National Shooting Sports Foundation at the time and Southwick to develop the first hunter and angler participation scorecards. These scorecards came out of an effort by the WAFWA R3 committee, and so this allows us to see key purchasing trends, key customer demographics, and really monitor things on a quarterly basis. Prior to these scorecards, and I know that there's another webinar that goes into more detail on the scorecards that you can go back to, but prior to these scorecards, we would either have to wait till the end of the year to see what our total sales were, but if we really wanted to dive deeper into participation rate, the number of new recruits, churn rate, and these key demographics, that really at that time required that we go out to contract with Southwick, who would do a big data dive into our license sale system and create a 500-page report that was based on information last year or the year before. And everybody's probably seen those huge reports. They're full of tables that break this down, but there was a real need to try to get that in as much real time as possible and in an at-a-glance tool. And so this is what we developed, and it served us very well so far. And if I have time, I might come back to the scorecards. So those are the building blocks, kind of the foundational tools that we've developed for R3. And so let's go into what would a Hunter R3 effort look like, considering the customer journey and using some of those tools that we've just outlined. And so the customer journey starts with somebody saying, hey, I'm looking for a new outdoor activity and or food source. The first step of that is what we call awareness and consideration. So in other words, if we're looking at that need for a new activity and or food source, a potential customer is going to have to A, be aware that that exists, and B, think that they have to see themselves participating in that particular activity. And if you don't cross both of those thresholds, they're going to drop out. And so here in Oregon, we've worked with a contractor called PacWest. It's a public relations and advertising firm out of Portland to develop the hunter awareness and promotions campaign. The first step of this campaign was to go out there existing and potential customers to see what messages resonate with them. And what we found was not entirely new in terms of our industry, but there are some caveats. And so that the primary motivation for existing hunters is spending time outside with friends and family and just the opportunity to be in the out of doors. For new participants who haven't hunted before, the primary consideration is the opportunity to harvest their own meat. And they also value spending time outdoors with friends and family, as well as conservation. And so the primary motivation is slightly different between those two groups, but as you can tell, there's some overlap there. So we can structure our messages to really speak to both of those audiences because we took the time on the front end to go out there and do that research to hear what messages resonated the most. And that's super important if we're going to get people to the point to where they can actually see themselves out there participating in these activities. Another way that we raise awareness and consideration is through sponsorship and participation at events that you wouldn't typically see a Fish and Wildlife Agency at. Um, we have sponsored Feast Portland for the last, I think, 4 years, and this is probably the largest foodie event west of the Mississippi. It gets, several 100,000 participants. And the first 3 years that we promoted and sponsored this, we had our booth set up in the area, and we just brought our publications there. And we really had to work to get people to come and talk to us. Most of the participants, or most of the sponsors and the vendors at this particular activity are chefs, wineries, breweries, who all have samples to give out to people. And so the participants are really looking for things that they can taste. And so last year we partnered with a wild game farm raised producer to have wild game dishes at our booth that we could give samples to. And we went from having, a couple hundred people come visit to us to having several thousand people come and interact with us. In fact, we were the one can't miss booth at this entire event. And our whole message was that this is meat that you can actually harvest yourself right here in Oregon to make that connection. You like food, you like good quality food, hunting and fishing provide your opportunity to go out there and secure good, high quality protein for yourself. And that message really resonates with people. Prior to last year, Oregon didn't have an archery education program, and we resisted running NASP out of the state agency. We didn't see the direct connection for a lot of years between target archery and hunting in particular. And when we developed this customer journey and we started looking at touch points and audiences, one of the things that we recognized almost immediately was that we really have no way to reach school-age children and their families unless those folks already come from a hunting background. And so we developed an archery education program, hired an archery education coordinator, our first one ever. We took ownership of the Oregon NASP program, as well as we are implementing S3DA. And again, not for the sole purpose of introducing archery to school-age kids, though there's a lot of benefit to that and value in that on its own. But our primary motivator here is to get information to these school-age children and their families about the resources that we have available to them to learn how to hunt and fish if they are interested in doing so. So it was a very purposeful strategy for us to go down this archery direction that is different than I think what a lot of state agencies probably think about that and how they probably utilize their program. All right, so once we get them through awareness and consideration, if we cross that threshold that where they can actually see themselves hunting, then kind of the real work begins, because then they're going to have to know, okay, how do I actually do this? And they go into this research phase. And so the next phase of the customer journey is evaluation, where people are actively looking for, what do I need, how do I do it, and where do I go? And the first part of that, what do I need? Every state has hunting regulations, and if they're anything like Oregon, they're tremendously complex and really not. They're a tremendous barrier, I think, in many aspects to people actually participating in hunting. One of the primary threats to participation in hunting and fishing that came out of the national work group was a lack of motivation. And a lot of people equate that to a lack of time, but if something's tremendously complex, people just don't have the motivation to spend the time necessary to understand that. And we did a survey a couple of years ago of our employees actually about ways that we can simplify the license buying experience. And this is one of my favorite quotes that I pulled out of that. And if that's one of our employees whose professional job relates to this stuff, just think what somebody who hasn't come from a hunting background feels when they are trying to understand hunting. Excuse me. And so we actually have a work group in place right now that's working to simplify the hunting regulations. We've identified kind of a three-phase approach to that. The first one is just going through looking at the verbiage and the organization of the pamphlet. That's going to be in place in 2018. And then we're going to get right to work at looking at the actual regulations themselves to see which ones can be simplified and eliminated. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that hunting regulations are not a barrier to new and continuing participation in Oregon. All right, the how do I do it? Like many states, we have a variety of hands-on classes that are designed to teach people how to hunt. We have an outdoor skills program that holds probably about a dozen workshops a year that teach people beginning hunting skills. So that's one way. And that's kind of the typical way that people and agencies have probably approached this idea of teaching people how to do these activities. But the other one is this, or what was called for in the national plan was the formation of adult self-learning tools. And so this is a product that we designed and just unveiled recently called How to Hunt for Deer and Elk in Oregon. And I'll see if this works, if we can get to it. And we won't go through the whole thing, but I'll go through this. This course is comprehensive. It takes them from the A to the Z of hunting deer and elk here in Oregon. It's a combination of written content, verbal content, pictures, and actually video content. And it's written for the true beginner. And so what we found out is for new participants, there's a lot of information out there. But most of that information is written by experts for people who probably already know pretty much what they're doing. Very little of it is written for the pure beginner level participant, and there's nothing comprehensive. And so what this course attempts to do is to create that comprehensive course designed specifically for the beginner. It doesn't teach them everything that they need to know. It doesn't go into the fine details, but it does give them a broad overview to where they will feel more comfortable in searching out new information. And so we're excited about that course. The next phase of that is we secured a grant from Cabela's Outdoor Fund and a partnership from NWTF to do something similar to this for turkey hunting. And one of the things that the national plan calls for is that every state should be working with their national partners in a way that makes the most sense. And so this is an opportunity for us to work with the experts in the field, NWTF, and create a better product than what Oregon could create on their own, and that would have national appeal. So hopefully this will be something that states can take and customize on their own. All right, finally, the where do I go portion of this. It's really important. This is one of the biggest barriers, and actually one of the biggest causes for hunter lapse is that some of their hunting ground that they're used to gets closed up or locked up, and they don't know where to go next. And so we're trying to create tools that help these folks find places to hunt. And if you think about all of these kind of what do I need, how do I do it, where do I go type tools that we're creating, a lot of these have use for not only brand new hunters but existing hunters as well. So we really see these kind of actions as addressing both recruitment and reactivate and retention um, initiatives. All right, the purchase. Again, for Oregon, this is a work in progress. It took 2 years to go from, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, having 4 paper documents that took up a ton of space in the wallet, down to one document that included all of those privileges on it. Where we really need to be is that picture on the right that a lot of states are going towards now is electronic licensing. We're working actively on an RFP um, to replace our current license sale system. But this is one that's it really gets in our way of success in terms of R3 right now. So a lot of states are leading the way on this, and I appreciate that. And we all have to be mindful that if we want people to continue hunting and fishing, we can't ignore the purchase part of the process. Likewise, and this is a little bit on the angling side of things, but it does have some utility for hunting recruitment and retention, is you can't ignore the buying process when a customer goes into a retail establishment. In Oregon, we push people, a lot of people, to trout fishing because it's super popular and it's super easy to get started. And we tell folks, hey, it's easy. You just need beginner level gear, basic equipment, and you're good to go. And then we send them into a sporting goods store, and this is what they see: thousands of different rods and reels, tackle assortments, bait assortments, and it's really complicated and intimidating for a new person who's not familiar with these activities to go in there and select what they think they might need for to get started in that activity. And so we partnered initially with Dick's Sporting Goods to create an end cap that kind of takes that away. And so what these end caps are designed to do is to link the retail establishment customers with the resources that ODFW has built to make it easier for people to understand how they do it, what they need, and where to go, while at the same time highlighting within that end cap just the basic gear that they need to get started. So again, it provides them the basic information they need, and it takes the intimidation of trying to select from thousands of different SKUs into just a few SKUs that'll meet their needs. And we've had discussions with Cabela's on expanding this to hunting applications. So right now, this particular end cap is in about 80 major retail establishments throughout Oregon. And this is one that's crossed the divide between national brands. So it's at all the Dick's Sporting Goods and all the Cabela's, and there's no exclusivity to that. This particular program, all of these particular strategies and actions are aimed at growing the pie, which is something that our retail and industry partners can latch onto and support. After they make their purchases, they go out there and go hunting. It's very important that we don't just think that our job is done there. We have to maintain engagement. One of the ways that we do that, primarily here at ODFW, is social media, and particularly Facebook has been really big for us. We are blessed to have a tremendous social media coordinator. One of the things that he's worked on recently is Facebook Live events, where we'll go out and we'll follow people who are actually hunting and fishing in the field live, and allow people to ask questions in real time. And we have a great relationship with a gentleman named Scott Hagen, who's a longtime hunting and fishing show host and a prolific outdoors writer. He's the exact right type of personality to do this type of a project with. And this is by far the most engaging thing that we've done here in terms of customer engagement. We've had 2 different Facebook Live events that have reached over 500,000 people, several that have reached over 250,000, and all of them have reached over 100,000. And so this is something that we're going to be putting more resources in because Scott's able to provide a real authentic voice that that sometimes some of the things he says, the agency may not necessarily be able to say as freely as Scott does. But again, the main thing is that people can ask questions in real time and have Scott address them in the field. So that's been a great tool for us. The other way that we get people engaged and grow their bond with the activity and with our agency is through Instagram. And we allow different individuals to take over our Instagram accounts for a week. And so Tim goes out and he searches for people who would have a good message that is consistent with what we're trying to deliver. And he'll let them post on the ODFW Instagram account for an entire week with different messages and stories. Again, it grows engagement and lends to the authenticity of our messaging. And so far, folks have responded very well to that. Similar or related to that, we are working on a new R3 centric website. It is due to be launched this fall, and at our current agency website, it's your typical government website. It's very difficult to find information, and so we're going to declutter that, decouple the public face of our agency that has to deal with a broad constituency, which is basically every citizen of the state of Oregon, and we're going to create an additional website that deals with just our customers, or those folks who come and buy hunting and angling licenses for us. And so the website will kind of become the key to where we drive everybody to. And so we're really looking forward to this. It's going to really leverage all the rest of our efforts. Another way that we engage people is our CRM system, which I touched on the front. Through that system, we're able to really take a deep dive into specific customers' buying habits, and we can reach out there to them with custom messages related to that. So this, again, a fairly new capability for us, and one that we're growing in our use of. All right, a little bit outside of the customer journey now. So that's taking you through the customer journey and how we develop strategies and tactics that support that journey. This does this as well, but it's a little bit outside of that. And really, this strategy comes from taking a deep look at the hunter adoption model, in particular, the continuation with support and the social support that's needed. And I know that a lot of states are now working on ways to build mentoring programs, which, if you hear them, and I've heard a lot of presentation, it's a really tough thing to do for a state agency to build a program that matches a willing mentor with an adult mentee in particular. And so we're looking at a couple of different strategies to try to approach that problem from a different perspective. I mentioned that we do outdoor skills workshops, learn to hunt workshops. We do about 12 of those a year. We have had previously one coordinator who is responsible for that. He does a great job of providing those workshops, but for a single person to do 12 of those is a lot of work in a given year, and he reaches a few hundred people through his efforts, which is great for those few hundred people, but it's not moving the needle on a big in a big way. It's not scalable, and so we know that's a successful model, and so we're looking at ways that we can actually scale that. And so we're working with the Oregon Hunters Association, training them up to deliver those workshops on our behalf. And every participant who registers for those Learn to Hunt workshops is getting a 1-year membership into the Oregon Hunters Association as part of their registration fee. The one thing that's unique about the Oregon Hunters Association is that they have chapters in nearly every county of the state who host monthly chapter meetings. So one of the other things that we're working on with the chapters at the local level is to make those monthly chapter meetings value added for the new participant, with the hope that we're not, at this point, we're not matching a mentor to a mentee at the one-to-one level, but we're creating a structure that supports that happening on its own at the local level. And so we're excited to see where this is going. We just hired a new program coordinator to build this program, and we're real excited at what the possibilities are for that. The other way we're approaching this is, again, with our work through PAC West and our hunter awareness and promotions campaign, we have a Take a Friend hunting contest that we're launching. And what this does is that it incentivizes the mentoring of hunters. And so the way that it works, and let's see, I think that we can link out to this. And so this is our OregonHunting.info page. This is the landing page for all of our hunting awareness and promotion campaign. And you can see that the Take a Friend hunting contest has begun. So one of the things that we've done is we've worked with industry to get some great prizes. The grand prize is a statewide deer tag, and that's an incredible prize. People pay tens of thousands of dollars for that through the auction process every year. So that's the grand prize. But also, industry has really stepped up to the plate, and as you can see, there's a wide variety of prizes that local and national folks have contributed to this. And the way that it works is an existing hunter goes on to the sign-up page, and they have to enter their hunter angler ID number, which is a unique identifier, and their mentee's hunter angler number. And to be valid, that new hunter who they're mentoring it either has to be their very first year of hunting or their second year. And so this gets at both the recruitment of brand new hunters and the retention of first year hunters who we know drop out at a higher rate. And so we just started pushing this early summer, and we've got already 400 people signed up for this, and we haven't really hit the main time frame when people start thinking about going hunting in Oregon. So again, we'll see what this looks like. We'll be able to evaluate this because we have the unique identifiers. But again, this is a different approach to encouraging mentoring outside of a state building a program specifically to get that done. So that you can see all of those strategies are centered around a customer, which is really important to us. And if you look at other industries, they're doing the exact same thing. And so as a natural resource agency, creating a customer-centric strategy wasn't even something that we knew how to even begin doing, but it does begin to pay dividends, and it makes sense to think of this customer journey as a process and what an individual is going to need throughout that process to get them from one level to the next, and begin making those connections and building those customer touch points that might be missing. And without some of those key touch points, you can see where people actually would drop off. Just think of it, think of yourself adopting a brand new activity. What critical piece of information would you need to undertake that activity? And if it wasn't there, would you really work hard to try to find that information, or would you just go on to something else? That's the kind of the dilemma that we have to solve. And as a basis for that, if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how we were at the point where we had transactional relationships with our customers, but now we really start having is these sustained relationships that build loyalty and eventually advocacy by having that solid social media base and by aligning our agency and partner efforts. And so no longer does our engagement over time ebb and flow, but it continues to build on itself, and we've seen that. Kind of the last thing that I'll leave you with, when you're thinking about customers and focusing on them, as you build strategies, whether or not it's looking at regulations, whether or not it's looking at a marketing campaign and promotional messaging, or hands-on workshops, whatever the case might be, know that customers have desires, aspirations, and dreams when they come to us. And for those are success factors. If we can harness those in our favor, we'll be doing ourselves a favor and setting ourselves up for success. Those same customers have missions and tasks to achieve. The easier that we can make it for them to acquire those knowledges or acquire the knowledge and skills they need to begin hunting, the easier we can make it for them to get the license and tags in their hands, the more we're going to set ourselves up for success. But likewise, it's also really important to note that people have fears, obstacles, and objections that we can't ignore. For those are failure factors. And to the extent that we can address those and minimize them, we're also going to be setting ourselves up more for success. And so, if you can't, if you haven't caught on yet, I'm a strong advocate, and everything that I do is centered around the customers and thinking about what they need. And it's created some really good synergy for us, not only for our customers, but the way that we work with each other here at the agency. Because when you break things down into these different aspects and the different needs of the different needs of customers, then all of a sudden people throughout the agency can really see where they fit into that process. Whereas before, if you talk about R3 in general terms, it's sometimes hard for, say, people in the licensing division to see where they fit in, or some of the resource folks are working on regulations to see where they fit in. But when you break it down like this, everybody can contribute along that journey someplace. And so it's really given us a platform for a cross-functional approach to R3 efforts. And with that, Marty, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
All right, yeah, we had a few questions come through, but if anybody has more questions, please type them in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner, and we'll get to as many of those as we can before 2. And then any leftover questions that we may have, we'll just include them in a post when we post this video to the R3 community website. So first, Chris, do you mind just giving a little background on yourself and how you ended up as the R3 coordinator at Oregon?
Yeah, so I've got, I think, probably a pretty unique background. I started out with a wildlife science degree from Oregon State University. Came to work immediately for the department, bounced around from a seasonal to seasonal job. And that was in the mid 90s when budgets were really tight around here. Didn't catch on immediately to a permanent job, so I left the agency for a while. Went back to school and got a marketing, another bachelor's degree in marketing. And as I was finishing up that degree, a position came open here at ODFW. So I came back to work for the agency, spent some time in the fish division doing some different business related stuff. And then a job opened up in I&E as the angler education coordinator. Took that position. From there, I was the hunter education coordinator for a while. And then went to work as the education sections manager before 2012, and that's when my position was reclassified to incorporate the R3 duties as well. And so, from my perspective, having that natural resource and the business degrees and that background has been really powerful in the work that I'm doing here on R3.
Alrighty. The next question would be, how has the process been to simplify the regulations in Oregon and working with law enforcement?
Wow, that's it's been interesting. It's a challenge, I think, because law enforcement, they want to be able to have their enforcement activities upheld in court, and so they really get nuanced with the regulations and the descriptions. Sometimes for just a small handful of cases. I think our job as R3 professionals is to get them to really balance the need to solve a relatively small enforcement issue that reaches just a small handful of violators, but that has the potential to really serve as a barrier to a large number of potential participants. And so we're always trying to balance those two needs and say, can the resource absorb losing this regulation if it results in much simplified regulations for the masses? And that's where that balancing act is at. We're also currently talking about technology and the thought of paperless licenses, paperless carcass tags, things like that. Law enforcement gets a little bit squirmy around those issues as well. In Oregon, the Fish and Wildlife regulations are enforced by the Oregon State Police, which is a separate agency than the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we're a little bit unique from most other states in that respect. But I think that those issues probably are pretty consistent between law enforcement, the resource folks, and the folks who are thinking about R3 type issues.
Alrighty. So, in regards to your Feast Portland event, have you been able to track those who visited your guys' table to their next step in hunting and fishing?
We have not, and so that's the one where I get asked quite a bit. Eventually, we will through our CRM. Our hope is that when we interact with people, we take their we take their email addresses, we put them in a bucket of people who are interested in fishing and hunting, and we're able to reach back out with specific messaging to that point. We're not there in our level of sophistication with our CRM in that regards, but I've had similar questions related to some of our digital advertising, initiatives and other things that make it really difficult, like the Learn to Hunt Deer, Elk, and Oregon course, where people are accessing digital resources. How can we track those? And the answer is that you really can't. And so that's one where, again, I've done some benchmarking on the private industry side of things. And those kind of initiatives, which serve to enhance the customer experience side of the world, those companies who are consistently overperforming in terms of customer experience, they lead the S&P 500 by about 50%, whereas those who are the customer experience laggards, they're trailing the market by about 80%. And so there's some real benefits to your overall efforts that you can't really track and evaluate, that you just have to kind of build trust on.
And can you say the name of the CRM that you guys are using again?
Ours is Salesforce and Exact Target.
Okay. Um, Michelle wants to know, did you have the targeted consumer to develop the online tool, either in development or now to evaluate?
Um, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Um, let's see. Can you chime in with maybe a little clarity there? It looks like she's typing. We'll just go to the next question for now. Um, what are you guys using to manage your access mapping program?
It is, I think, Google Maps based, and so we started out with just doing it all ourselves, which we started with David Lane, who's our promotions coordinator, and a guy named Dave Bedeau from our wildlife division. They went in there, started it themselves, and they were able to get a pretty sophisticated map just on their own using over-the-counter Google mapping tools. Since that time, we have hired a vendor. I can't. That's one I could go back and figure out exactly who that is, but we've added a pretty significant level of sophistication to our access mapping um, using a private contractor. But I'd have to go back and see exactly who that was.
All right. So we did get a little clarity on that question. What role did the target audience have in developing the online self-learning site?
Okay. Um, so we through our survey work and through our fee package leading up to, we had a fee increase in 2016, the first one that we'd had in 6 years. As part of that process leading up to what those fees were going to be, we did a variety of customer engagement type activities. We had an ideation session that was in place to generate just a ton of ideas on ways that we can enhance the customer experience. We had focus groups throughout the state, in addition to some town hall style meetings. And throughout that process, we heard from customers that it'd be nice to have these kinds of resources that taught them how to do these things. Also related to that is I read a book by Lily Roth, who It's called Call of the Mild, and I reached out to her. She lives in Oregon, and so I sat down and she's an adult onset hunter, taught herself how to hunt, came from I believe it's Manhattan, across the United States, and wanted to have that kind of Western authentic experience. And so I've had the opportunity to get to know her a little bit, and she is a trained journalist, um, and she had a difficult time finding the information again because she said all the information out there is written by experts, for people who already have a general understanding of what they're up against, and there's nothing out there for the true beginner in mind. And so those conversations really kind of it lit a light bulb for me that saying, we're kind of missing the boat here. We have to break things down stick figure like and help these people, um, provide these people with information that's at their level and that's comprehensive. The first project that we did was how to fish for trout in Oregon. And that particular effort was a series of 13 or 14 videos, and all of the videos were topic specific, ranging from about 2.5 minutes to I think 5 minutes, and all geared towards the true beginner. And we had a really good feedback in terms of that product. And so we didn't go back and specifically have customer focus groups as we were developing the deer and elk course. That probably would have been a good idea. But we did have some groundwork that this is the approach that resonates with people, and the type of information and packaged in a way that is going to be received well by folks.
Alrighty. So it looks like that was all the questions we have there, but and it's about time that we wrap it up anyway. So Chris, thank you very much for giving us a presentation on engaging hunters in Oregon. Everybody that attended, thank you very much for listening in. We will post this probably later this week or early next week to the R3 community website. That's nationalr3plan.com. Go in there, talk about anything you heard today, any ideas, get some feedback from people. You can reach out to Chris on the R3 community website as well. Ask him any questions you didn't get a chance to ask today. We sent out a little survey in the chat box, and we will send a follow-up email with that link as well. If you don't mind filling out that survey, just so we can keep our topics useful for you guys and get some good feedback from you. And yeah, so we'll see you guys again next month when we have another R3 webinar. And Chris, thanks again for doing this for us.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk to you guys next month. Thanks.